who's the boss of me?
Right.
Loopholism is to close Jesus is the master loophole closer. So we can answer that question. Who's the boss of me?
Right.
Why is that such a pertinent question for someone who says, I want to not only believe in Jesus, I want to become like Christ?
I think if you want to be a Christ-centered person, if you want the Spirit of God to flow within you, you'll know that it's your connection with God.
And welcome to One More Thing. I'm with Dr. Bauckham this morning.
Good morning.
So we're week 2 into our ism series. So we started with the big one, legalism, last week. But when you sent me the notes for this one, I was like, loopholism.
Yeah.
Man, it got my mind going a million miles a minute. That was just a brilliant, brilliant teaching that you put together, and I got to add some input into it. But what was it about the loopholism that you've seen as a pastor? I mean, we've seen people, the whole idea behind this was, for people who didn't get to see it, was it makes following Jesus about picking and choosing the teachings of Jesus that are more convenient for my life and the preferences I have. What's wrong with that? Why can't we just cherry pick?
Well, that's a good question, but it also falls into legalism. Legalism, I can't be always perfect, but I can find a loophole. So it's really an extension of legalism.
That's right.
With the loopholes, which is kind of fun. But I think that we do pick and choose. I think that and even as teachers, I'd much rather teach the story of the lost son or the Good Samaritan than go back in and talk about some of these terrible murders that happened in the Old Testament in the name of God. Some of those stories are just brutal. Or go to Leviticus and talk about Levitical law.
Oh, yeah.
You know, your tassels need to be here or that, and the breastplate and all the different dimensions of the temple, and who cares? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really affect my daily life. But I do think when you get into the place where you tell the stories about relationships and the stories about people's lives, David, we talked about Abraham, those are the ones I think we can all relate a little more to.
That was doing those case studies was when you said it, both services. Let's go to our case study number 1. Abraham. Immediately, you could hear the visceral reaction of the crowd. They were like, "Oh, we kind of know where you're going with this." So I want to ask this question because it seems as though like we could find loopholes in the scriptures. Like, the story you told at the end was brilliant with the little girl. Yeah. It says obey your parents, but it doesn't say every day.
Right.
Like, you can find those loopholes, but I think we also can create those loopholes. I remember when I was in seminary, the student center, the main center, became like just a debate hall between the minds of theology, whatever. And I was talking about, when you brought up the Levitical law, it made me think about this, where we were talking about these different Levitical laws and how some carry like what they would call like a universal ethical weight, whereas others did not. And I said, I think I used the word, that's like you're creating a loophole.
Right.
I said, because the Bible doesn't call this a ceremonial law or a morally ethical law or this law. I said, you create those paradigms to fit your mindset. And one of the big ones was on homosexuality. Well, that's a universal ethical law. And I went, no, that's just a Levitical law based upon this type of people. In our long tenures as pastors, yours longer than mine, what are some loopholes that you've seen people create for themselves when we talk about following Christ? Because we say it's not about following rules. It's about this connection that we have.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just that I've had people say, well, that tithing, that's an Old Testament concept. So, but I'm under this new law where there's no tithing. And the same thing is true that, the God of the Old Testament is not the God of the New Testament. So we ignore the Old Testament principles because it's really irrelevant. Well, if it is, then why do we have it in the book? Why do we include all that together? But we pick and choose. I mean, it's just about picking and choosing, like you said earlier. And was Levitical law number this or that? And when you said that, my mind went to the fact that in the Old Testament there were sins committed by the community. If you committed a sin, then you could bring two doves or you bring a lamb or whatever to atone for your sins. But there's some things that you do that got you kicked out of the community. And you were out.
Wow.
And when they kicked you out of the community, it was almost like a death sentence because you could not survive without community.
Yep.
Wandering in a wasteland by yourself to where other factions and tribal things would see you, and but there's some sins that just got you kicked out. Now, so which ones are sins before God? Which one's going to create problems for you? Which ones are going to send you to hell? Which ones, you can start going through the New Testament.
That's right.
So this whole concept of life after death, it's something that's you don't find it in the Old Testament,
Right.
and you find very little of it in the New Testament,
Right.
But we superimpose what we hear
That's
on
right.
things, and we've got a long way to go.
That's
you and I have a lot to teach.
That's right. That's right.
And but it's a great opportunity to teach in community, and I think the people are very receptive. Not a lot of arguments going on.
No.
People they're looking for something that makes sense. Show me a common sense religion
Yeah.
or common sense spirituality, something I can follow that makes sense. And I think we're trying to present that in a way that's honest, it's academic, it's as truthful as we can.
That's right.
And I think it's resonating with our community strongly.
It's really awesome to be a part of, because even if people may disagree with something we say, it's not like they're packing up their bags and leaving
Right.
Suncoast, which is what is awesome and healthy about this place. They approach us because we're in the foyer with people. It's not like we hide and we're super spiritual, talking about that legalism, that super spiritual legalism. I'm the man of God, the pastor. I'm too important to just be amongst the...
Right.
And if people, they'll come and ask and say, what did you mean by this? What
Right.
did you mean? And it gives us a chance to clarify, or even what I would say, close the loophole in some instances where they're like, that makes a lot of sense, and they move on.
Yeah.
It's not like they're throwing us under the bus,
No.
which is beautiful. And it brings me to the last question, because I hadn't read, for some reason I didn't see point 4, because usually we do 3 points. And when I clicked on it, I said, oh, man. And this idea comes back to, and I like how you concluded it, it's to ask ourselves the question, who's the boss of me?
Right.
Loopholism is to close Jesus is the master loophole closer. So we can answer that question. Who's the boss of me?
Right.
Why is that such a pertinent question for someone who says, I want to not only believe in Jesus, I want to become like Christ and follow this Spirit of God that is within me and pulling me towards more in my life. So how do we answer that question? Who's the boss of me?
Well, I think you just did. I think if you want to be a Christ-centered person, if you want the Spirit of God to flow within you, you'll know that it's your connection with God. And He's not a tyrant. He is that which nudges you. So look, I want to help you become the best version of you. And if you let my Spirit not boss you around, but if you let my Spirit help direct you, you'll find the way that's fulfilling to you, and you'll be the best Troy Doucet that you can possibly be, or the best Larry Bauckham that I can be. And then we used to call that surrender. I just surrender my life to God, and I let God be the boss of me. But the reality is, I am doing that, and the phrase I use, because I think it was a 3-year-old, you're not the boss of me. But sometimes we spend all our lives saying, God, you're not the boss of me. But those of us who are humble ourselves, we realize He is the reason I exist. And He doesn't command me like He's the boss, but He loves me through as the great Father.
That's right.
Or great Mother, whatever that He is, the Spirit. That's the better way to say it. So I set it up to kind of make a little a roundabout, but I don't know if I ever got there or not.
Yeah, no. I think it was a pertinent question, because it all flowed really well. And I used the story you told. I was on the phone with my sister yesterday, and she just had some questions about God, and they're going through some stuff. And I used the story about the house builder. And I just said, don't cut corners in building your life.
Yeah.
Don't cut corners. And it really moved her and her fiance very emotionally to say, yeah, that it's so easy to cut corners. But God is handing us the keys back to our life. God is not trying to take the keys from us. He's trying to give the keys to our life, saying, use the best materials. Use the best land. Find the best. This is your life. And when reading it versus hearing you say it with the passion and the belief you had behind it, like that moved me to say, to inspect, right? That whole inspection, correction, connection.
Yeah.
To inspect, where have I cut corners? And let's go back and get that 90-degree square. Let's get the house square again. That's kind of how I'd put it.
Yeah. And sometimes it's, you can go back and go, I don't know that I can fix that, but I will tell you, I'll never do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And my resolve is I will not be that. Because sometimes you tell a story, maybe there's an exaggeration or something got in there, or you led people to believe something that wasn't exactly the right thing. And I remember as a kid telling stories that were kind of one-upmanship stories.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, as an adult, I go, I don't think those stories were even true. Sometimes they were made up, and or so exaggerated. And there's a time of honesty and saying, I'm not going to be that. I'm going to be an honest person who tells the truth, because the truth is the truth.
Yeah.
And I'm going to remember the best I can. And you know, I honor people by not one-upping them.
Yeah.
And I think the one-upmanship thing, there's a whole story there. But I think back to the house builder. You know, you're building a house with your life, and it's your house. So the house that you build is yours.
That's right.
And I'm just so grateful, a lot of analogies, that there's an architect that's better than me that shows me the plans that could be.
Yeah.
And some engineering saying, hey, here's some engineering. If we do this, it could make it better. But then it comes back to me to implement those things.
That's right.
And I've got to be a man of integrity, a man of character, and try to be as honest as we can to ourselves. Because the person we lie to most is ourselves.
That's right.
And anyway, but that's a great teaching. I look forward to this weekend.
What's this weekend?
Meism.
Meism.
And it's going to, believe it or not, they all hook together.
That's right.
Meism often involves loopholeism, and it really is about, it's really a legalistic point of view too.
Yeah.
When the focus is on me. And, you know, we'll expand that more this weekend. It'll be fun.
Can't wait. Thanks a lot, Dr. Bachman.
My pleasure.